A reading from the book of Job. Job answered his friends and said, I know well that it is so. But how can a man be justified before God? Should one wish to contend with him, he could not answer him once in 1,000 times. God is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who has withstood him and remained unscathed? He removes mountains before they know it. He overturns them in his anger. He shakes the earth out of its place, and the pillars tremble. And the pillars beneath it tremble. He commands the sun, and it rises not. He seals up the stars. He alone stretches out the heavens, and treads upon the crests of the sea. He made the Bear and the Orion, the Pleiades and the constellations of the south. He does great things past finding out, marvelous things beyond reckoning. Should he come near me, I see him not. Should he pass by, I am not aware of him. Should he seize me forcibly, who can say him nay? Who can say to him, what are you doing? How much less shall I give him any answer, or choose out arguments against him? Even though I were right, I could not answer him, but should rather beg for what was due me. If I appealed to him, and he answered my call, I could not believe that he would hearken to my words. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord.
As Jesus and his disciples were proceeding on their journey, someone said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus answered him, Foxes have dens, and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head. And to another he said, Follow me. But he replied, Lord, let me go first and bury my father. But he answered him, Let the dead bury their dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. And another said, I will follow you, Lord, but first let me say farewell to my family at home. Jesus answered him, No one who sets a hand to the plow and looks to what was left behind is fit for the kingdom of God. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
You know, I've come to the deeper and deeper appreciation of the importance of the context, the milieu, the environment, even the world view and the local view out of which the scriptures came, or out of which the significant insights from our history came, as having something very important to say to us as to how we understand them. So, let me get down to today's readings. The book of Job comes from a view of, or an understanding, or perhaps an image of God as being a worldly ruler. In other words, you have how do we depict God? Well, it's clear from the beginning of the book of Job that he is a king in his court. And the people who are in charge of various aspects of running that kingdom, or perhaps that empire, that world, all-embracing empire, come before him to report periodically. And, well, Satan is one of them. Satan is one of the servants of the ruler, God, who has his job on earth, and he comes and reports. Now, the word Satan means the tempter. So, his job seems to be in some way to try the loyalty of the subjects so that the king knows basically who to save and who to destroy, because that's the way kings are. Seems that's the way rulers are these days too. So that was the image out of which Job comes. And I kind of think that the entirety of the book of Job is basically challenging that kind of view, that kind of image of God as an understanding coming from how earthly emperors and kings and their courts and their rule operate. By the time Jesus comes along, kingship was a distant memory. The one generation after King David, basically everything fell apart. And the kingdom became divided, conquered, never could quite reestablish itself, was ruled by others except for that very short time of the Maccabees. And so the context in which Jesus is operating here is what replaced kingship and the political loyalty of kingship in Jesus' time. It was tribal loyalties, family loyalties. And so that was pretty much uppermost in most Jews' minds when they kind of looked out and tried to decide who's ours and who is theirs, who's them and who's us. And it basically boiled down to family identity. Now, Jesus here, I think, is challenging that family identity. He's not operating out of the context of how we view our own families. He's operating out of the context of family loyalty and family identity is strong enough that it is worth fighting and killing for, which is what people did and still do in many parts of the world, including our own. Because that's one reason why I find Father Greg Boyle's, I'm still talking about him, Father Greg Boyle's insights from his own experience so very, very valuable. Because the family loyalty out of which so many people operate and their worldview depends, in this particular stratum of society, there is no, shall we say, generational family that these gang members can identify with. So the gang becomes their family. And Father Boyle's insight, really, from what he has experienced and done and the way he operates, is to give a new family loyalty. Just as Jesus gives a new family loyalty. And the family of Jesus is universal. It's not your mother and your brothers and your sisters are out here asking for you. It is, who is my family? Everybody. And everybody who does the will of my Father in particular is kin to me. And it's the will of my Father to go out and make everybody your family. That is, what I find so tremendously wonderful about his insight of radical, universal kinship. Now, Greg Boyle does not mention universal kinship, but he does mention radical kinship as really the best way to understand the family of God or the kingdom of God in our world today. Operating out of a sense that we are all brothers and sisters of one family. Not just giving that lip service, as we so often do, and then going out from our prayer or from our idealized thoughts and being divisive in the way that we act, but being motivated by that strong commitment, that drive, that everything that we do has to serve broadening those family relationships into to fulfill the vision of Jesus Christ, that we are all one family in God. In that context, I think what Jesus is saying here is important. He's walking with his disciples to Jerusalem for crucifixion, and he knows that. And so the people who want to follow him, he is continually reminding him, what is the cost of your following me? The cost of your following me is to make your kinship, your identity with God's family, number one in your life that supersedes everything else. So that, I think, is a good meditation for us as we embark on this day. There are so many challenges to being God's family in a radically inclusive sense in each one of our lives, in each one of our communities, in each one of our families. How do we act in a way that promotes that rather than that awareness, rather than clouds it, rather than weakens, damages, even destroys it?